All right. Hey, everyone. This is Jared Hulse with IronHistory.com again. This is my fourth interview, I believe, in the series of Men of Iron. And I was looking to kind of highlight people, interview people who have had a history of weightlifting, physical culture. And I thought of Bill. He is the brainchild behind IronHistory.com and kind of mastermind behind the scenes as far as keeping the whole system running for 20 plus years now. So I thought but he also has a history as a writer and a power lifter and writes about not just powerlifting and high intensity training, but also about physiques. And also he has a history in the grip field. So we have several different kind of topics to go through. So welcome, Bill. And I
Thanks,
thought,
Jared.
and it's Bill Piche is how you pronounce it,
Yep, that's it. Yep,
which I didn't know
perfect.
for many years. I was saying it wrong until I, in my head
we
anyway.
yeah, we get all sorts of pikey, pick,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
very few.
My last name is Hulse, but people always, if back in the day when you always be telemarketers, if they said Hulse, I'd be like,
You
all
hang up
right,
the
like,
phone.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But anyway, so why don't we just start at the beginning? Just tell us when you were born, and then we're not going to go through your whole childhood, but let's start with like kind of when you started weight training. What got you into that?
So I was born June 6, 1963, and what got me in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, Upper Peninsula, Michigan. I grew up in the boom of snowmobiles and snowmobile racing,
Really?
and which
Yeah.
is why you'll never find me anywhere near snow in a snowmobile. So we basically did that growing up exclusively because we're on the border. If you look up Sault Ste. Marie, I'm on the border of Canada.
Oh,
And so
okay.
Bombardier and the Ski-Doo were one of the first, basically the first snowmobile.
Was
And
it
so I did.
because you saw it was dangerous, or you just did it enough and you were done with it? So, ugh. You said
Well,
you were done with the snow and
yeah,
snowmobiling.
I mean, as soon as I went to Iowa, I didn't get rid of the snow, but I got rid of the snowmobiles for sure once I left home.
Yeah.
I ended up going to Michigan Tech University in engineering in the western UP of Michigan, which had even more snow. It was basically over 300 inches per winter.
Wow.
And once I came to Iowa, my first job, and was in Iowa ever since until I replanted myself here in Florida, mid Central Florida, in the last 3 years.
Oh, I didn't realize
So
it was
what
that
got me into
recent.
oh yeah, 3 years. It was we saw the writing on the wall. It was February 2021, and we moved after 34 years in Iowa, the
Hey,
whole time in
Hey,
five
Bill. Oh,
weeks.
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is an interruption I said might happen. I didn't realize it happened 2 minutes in. Let me go tell them to be
Oh
quiet.
no, okay, cool.
That was it. Just
Okay,
hold on. Wait 1 second.
you bet.
Yes. Sorry about that. We knew that was going to happen, but I didn't realize it was so soon.
Yeah,
But fortunately, we're not a
no,
very
no problem,
professional
man. No problem.
organization, so it's fine.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. So you say you recently moved to Florida. Well, it was only 3 years, which I didn't know.
Yeah, so we recently moved to Florida, and then of course the pandemic hit, and
Oh, right
COVID
on.
hit, and
Yeah.
then everybody was working remotely, and I had already wanted to come to Florida. The opportunity arose because of just the way things were going from a leadership standpoint, and people were more open to it. So we were down here before things went south, so to speak, even though I was south.
Yeah.
And going back to growing up, so I started lifting in 1979, and I think I've read some stories, and I think there's others that have were in a similar situation. I love comic books, and in the back during I got bullied severely when I was in grade school.
Hmm.
And I remember I was a fan of comic books, Spider-Man, and the the ad for kicking sand in the face, Charles Atlas
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
kicking sand in the face with the bully.
Hmm.
I remembered, of course, when I was getting bullied at the time as well, and so the
Struck home.
bully, yeah, the bullying basically stopped into high school, And then I was very involved in sports in middle school and then into high school as well. And so I was pretty weak, pretty small, and was really didn't want to get the tar kicked out of me. And so although that previously, and I went to the newsstand and I saw Muscle Builder Power and Robbie
Which was your
Robinson
first
on
one you bought? So you bought a magazine
Robbie
or you,
Robinson,
oh,
the
Robert Ross
magazine.
almost.
Robbie Robinson was on it was his head on the front cover.
I think I
I've
know the
got
one
it
you're talking about.
yeah, I've got it somewhere in here. And I just devoured that. And so I got my first plastic weight set in between freshman and sophomore years of high school
Some of
with
those
the
late seven,
concrete.
yeah. Some of the late 70s muscle builder covers are like some of the most iconic and best covers. I'm not sure who was taking the photos then, but there was a series like in the late 70s. They're just amazing covers there. I think I know the Robbie Roberts one you're talking about.
Yeah, and so I started lifting for sports.
Okay.
And of
What
course
sports did you play?
nobody yeah, basketball, football, track. So I did all three of those sports. Did that through middle school and then into high school through senior year, basically. I stopped track my sophomore year, and the reason I stopped track my sophomore year is running is not conducive to building muscle. It's just
Yeah.
obviously
Yeah.
go look at a marathon runner, right?
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I didn't want to get
Yeah.
smaller after I spent all this time building muscle. So I'm like, heck with that, just football and basketball, and that's what I ended up doing in high school. So I started with the old concrete weight set, and be a little factoid is I quickly went to the 110 pounds, and of course I didn't work legs, no deadlifts, no legs back in the day. It would make you slow.
Were you just
Back
making
in the
up your
day, it
routine
was
or did you have a actual, were you following
yeah.
some?
I try anything in so Muscle Builder Power would have some powerlifting things going, routines and everything going on at the time, and so I modeled it again, whatever I would read in Muscle Builder basically, and would try different things. And so that's how I got started lifting. And to add more weight, we had snowmobile boots, as they're called, which is thermal insulated boots. And what I did was we had a fireplace, and it was in the basement, and it was one of those rickety, tubular steel, multi-combo benches.
Uh-huh.
And what I ended up doing is hanging by the strings, I'd put logs in the snowmobile boots. I would weigh the logs, and so I'd have 5 pounds in each snowmobile boot,
That's
and I
crazy.
would tie them on the ends of the bar for more resistance.
I,
Honest to goodness, I
that
did
might
that.
be,
And
I mean, I've seen people tie chains and various other weights and things. I don't know if I've ever seen boots. So that might be it's snowmobile boots of all things. That might be a new one.
snowmobile boots
But
with
yeah.
with kindling in it,
Yeah.
with kindling for the
You
fireplace
should have
in it.
set them on fire. That would have,
And
when
that
you squatted, it would have been gone viral.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I basically started that, and then I kept lifting and got my first 300-pound Olympic weight set. And I also saw in the back of Muscle Builder Power at some point, Powerlifting USA, and they advertised, big physique and big and strong. But I also saw Franco Colombo, who said he powerlifted,
Yeah.
and it's like I want to be strong like that and look like that.
Yeah, exactly. Is what powerlifting USA, did it start late 79, 78, somewhere around there? Was
Yep,
it
that's right.
yeah,
You got it.
yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and so I subscribed. I would devour that every month. So I subscribed, I believe in late 80, 1980, early 1981. I graduated from high school in 81. And so Dr. Ken Leistner was, if I even pronounce it, hopefully I didn't,
That's how I
rest in
say it
peace,
too.
Dr. Ken.
Yeah.
I got reading his column, and it just made complete sense. And of course, he was tied into sports a lot of times, especially football.
Hmm.
And so I just would get that and devour it every month. And he was the first article I went to. And so he was really everything that I am today from a lifting standpoint, Cyberpump, everything, grip. It all goes back to Dr. Ken and Powerlifting USA. Frankly, that's what got it all kicked off.
Nice.
And I was very fortunate years later, to actually know Dr. Ken and be able to email him and have him get his permission to use old articles of his on Cyberpump.
Oh yeah, I was going
And
to ask you about him also later on, but yeah, you can talk about it now. I mean,
yeah, well, I'll skip back again, and
yeah.
so I started powerlifting and gained 30 pounds in a year.
Mhm.
Post high school, the first year I started powerlifting, I gained 30 pounds. I went from about 165 to 195.
And
And
you said post high school, so like you're 18,
yes, yep,
19, something like
yep,
that.
yep,
So you had already been working out for maybe 4 years or something like
yep,
that before
yep.
that.
And all over the place. I didn't,
Yeah,
and Dr. Ken got me on a solid, squat, bench press, deadlift, press,
yeah,
chins, barbell curl routine at
yeah, yeah.
that point in time.
He always is a big fan of a squat followed by stiff leg deadlift.
Yep.
It's that was in a lot of his routines for
Yeah,
sure.
and it worked, obviously. I
Yeah,
mean, I blew up, and all I did, knew nothing about nutrition, just protein. Started mail ordering Dynamic Muscle Builder. So if you want to know what my
nice.
first protein powder
That
was,
was Weeders, right?
yep, the
Yeah,
Weider Dynamic
yeah.
Muscle Builder. Found a place in Midland, Michigan that
Hmm.
would actually mail out, you can mail order to. So it was
Okay.
all done manually, snail mail and everything, the money, send a money order, and
Hope
they'd
you get
send.
it, cross your fingers. Hope it comes.
Uh-huh,
Yeah,
yep, for sure. And so that's where the only thing I knew for a long time was, got to get enough protein.
yeah,
Got to get the protein,
yeah.
and ran with that, and it worked,
Protein in my
obviously.
coffee.
Yeah, yeah, and it worked, for me especially. And so I power lifted from about 81 to 1991, our first child was born.
Did you is
So
that competing that whole time or?
yeah, state, I was fortunate enough. When I first competed, of course, I had no idea about drug influence, even at the state level in
Yeah.
powerlifting, even at the state level. And I quickly found out about that, and was very fortunate to be at the front end of the ADFPA, American Drug Free Powerlifting Association, when they first started.
Did you know them, or
Okay,
you
that
just happened to
organization.
compete in their organizations? Like, did you?
Well, I didn't. I knew through Powerlifting USA. I found
Okay.
out through Powerlifting US. And in order to compete, we drove, my hometown buddy and I. Sault Ste. Marie's pretty small. We drove 11 hours to get to an ADFPA meet in Wisconsin. That's how we're not competing at the
Yeah,
open
yeah.
anymore. If there's this option, because
Drug free.
I did, I've been lifetime drug free and have been, and Dr. Ken basically said, you don't need it. You just
Yeah,
squat, bench press, deadlift,
yeah.
and based
Was
on my
there drug
results,
testing for the? Do you remember if there was drug testing just for the winners, or how did that work on that? Or
they drug tested the winners and other random people, and it
okay.
was polygraph. It
Oh,
was
okay.
at the very beginning. It was polygraph,
Gotcha.
and in that first competition, I was competitive, way more competitive, obviously, instead of getting smoked.
Hmm.
And so I continued to compete in the ADFPA, and did a few other random meets along the way, and along the way too, when we moved to Iowa, because I started in my basement gym, there was no hardcore, because I wanted to be more hardcore powerlifting gyms when we moved to Iowa, and so built the gym in my basement in Iowa, and did that with both Ryan and Amanda, both kids, trained them, started them off in through college, and then once they were off in college, I went back to a commercial gym.
Did you ever have any training partners, or were you training by
Nope,
yourself?
nope, always by myself.
Yeah, I'm pretty
I
much by
I
myself
take that
too.
back. I take that back.
My wife.
I'm forgetting. In Iowa, I needed someone to spot all the time, and so I had Abby Habhab is his name. He's now retired. He went to University of Iowa, and I was actually driving to the Gold's Gym in Iowa City, Iowa, to train
Okay.
before we had kids, and
Yeah.
did the basement gym. And reflection, was really dumb. I did so many dumb ego-driven things when I was in my 20s and
That's
early
part of
30s.
it. That's part of
Yeah,
it.
I
It really
reflect
is.
back, including not using proper form, right? And
Yeah.
and
I didn't start lift till late '90s, and you're talking about the '80s, and I would say even in the late '90s, even with I know we'll talk about Hard Gainer and Stuart McGruber, and there's and their form emphasis, but even then I would say a lot of what they taught was incorrect compared to, I mean, there probably
Yeah.
definitely obviously people knew how to lift, but in book format and magazine format, I would say that it just wasn't. There's definitely, there's good. Now there's so much information is good and bad, and it's hard to sift through.
Uh-huh.
But I don't think there was a lot of good form information. I feel that's where a lot of my back usually came from, is that I was following bad advice really on how to
Yep.
squat properly.
Yep.
And it took me actually almost 20 years to figure that out.
Yeah, me as well. On
Yeah,
and how to really train hard too.
yeah.
For me, is probably within the last 10 years of really what it takes focus wise to train hard,
Mhm.
and which is almost 180 degrees out of phase the way when I first started in my 20s, for sure. Everything was explosive, be aggressive, just
Mhm.
attack the bar, especially in powerlifting. Well, that
Sure.
people don't recognize the body is not made of titanium,
Yeah.
and which people still have a hard time grasping that. So it's like your body can wear out.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, you don't see. I mean, obviously there are unique individuals and people who can adapt
Sure.
more than others, but you don't see a lot of older powerlifters. And if they do,
Right.
their weights are a lot lighter. But it's partially strong, but also it's just most people burn out. Their bodies physically, not just mentally. I mean,
Yeah.
they have to figure out new ways to train so that they can still train and not hurt themselves. Really.
Yep.
But unfortunately, most of us hurt ourselves to learn that lesson.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I was there as well. And so once I stopped powerlifting, eventually I did learned about nutrition to speed things up a little bit. Learned about nutrition and had really three different transformations along the way to where my goal is now is being able to train. I love to train. I train so people would freak. I train every day. I lift every day when I
Yeah,
can.
I hear you. It's way
but
different
but
than.
it but it's only 15 minutes, one set to and it's very controlled,
Mhm.
and I'm able to quote recover, and I love going to the gym early in the morning, that whole process of getting my blood flowing, and I'm in and out usually in 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes, which is only 6 minutes. The gym here where I'm in an over 55 now, the gym is a 6-minute walk. So I walk to the gym in the morning, and
It's
I'm
nice.
the youngest guy there at the with the all
So
the,
would it be fair to say that it's more bodybuilding like as far as
it's bodybuilding.
contractions?
Oh,
Yeah,
100
yeah,
percent.
yeah.
And actually, yeah, it's 100% bodybuilding, longevity, keeping my muscle, having great bloods every year, not being on prescription drugs at all, which is a goal of mine to see how long I can be if I can get to 70. The next
So how old are you right
uh,
now? 60, right?
60.
So just
Yeah.
60 exactly. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm looking at 65 and then 70 with being not on zero over the counter or prescription meds as like longevity goals.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll just go back just a little bit. What would just before we finish with powerlifting? What were your best lifts?
So squat in a meet was 525,
Okay.
and bench press was 340, and deadlift was 600.
Yeah, and I think I just read that. So you did a triple body weight on the deadlifts. What was your
Yeah,
body
and that
weight?
was 193.
Okay.
I was actually, I remember
Amazing.
that because it was
Yeah.
such a big goal. And the other goal, because the drug-free powerlifting hadn't started yet, I'm not delusional today. Drug-free powerlifting hadn't really started yet. And so the top 50, I knew if I hit 600, I could make the top 50 in the nation at the time,
Mhm.
just based on number of people doing it too, right? And
Yeah.
so I was
Yeah.
able that year in '89 when I hit 600 to be number
Was it
49th in the nation.
was it in the
So
Powerlifting USA? Is it listed there or?
yeah, it would have been. ADFPA used to have their own newsletter as well.
Okay.
So in that meet, they used to, and I got this little award, for top 50 in
Nice.
the nation, ADFPA. But like I said, I'm not delusional. I wasn't at the back of the line genetically, but it certainly wasn't at the front, in
Yeah.
my opinion, based on that. So
So
what
this
people
take
can do today.
so the powerlifting took you to the what mid 90s or when did you quit?
Yeah, so 93, so our son was born in 91,
Hmm.
and then 93 I basically hung it up in 1993, and part of it was again the injuries, and anytime I deadlift my back would start to get inflamed.
Mhm.
you know, from just abuse of
Yeah, for
of
sure.
lifting deadlifts and squatting, and I just couldn't do it anymore. And then I recognized also from a longevity standpoint, at some point, is spinal compression isn't a good thing. People don't recognize compressing your spine all the time
Mhm.
as you age, probably not a good thing to do, and especially with my lower back the way it was. So
Yeah.
I don't squat. I haven't squatted or deadlifted in years. Okay, so I removed those from anything that would compress my spine. I removed from my routine.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm 44 and I've had back issues for 15 plus years already. It's better now, and I've changed my training already. It's in the process as always. But my wife, who's just a few months, 6 months younger than me, but she's deep in powerlifting still. And I try to tell her
Wow.
like you should do some other stuff, health things. And she does a lot of flexibility work and is always working it. But for years, for she was, she was younger and she was just robust and she'd injure herself and she would heal in a week where it would take me 6 months. So she never really had to think about it much. But she just has thicker bones than I do. And anyway, but now she's starting to think about, but still, she's no. I'm a power lifter. I am powerlifting. All right, you're gonna have to learn the lesson yourself. At some
Well,
point.
the thing
Yeah.
I would do differently is cycle out of doing the power lifts. I probably
I've
would have
tried to
power
do that
lifted
too.
longer. You know what I
She
mean?
does
Cycle
cycle.
out
She
of
does
them.
cycle, but she doesn't. I say like I tell her I think you should probably take like at least like 3 or 4 months off a year and
Yes,
do like,
exactly.
but she'll take like a week off or something, or she cycles her weights, but she's really always powerlifting. I
Yeah.
can't,
I mean,
she'll
go
do
to
her own thing.
bodybuilding, right? Yep.
What?
Go to bodybuilding for two. Mine in my head was 2 to 3 months for sure, Jared. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, she'll have to find her own path there.
yeah.
But
Yep.
that's it. So then so we're talking about the mid 90s, and that was around when Cyberbuzz started.
Yeah.
So you're training, you were just training on your own then? Well, you're just
Yep.
not going for
Yep. Just down in the basement.
yeah.
Still down in the basement, just training on my own. Yep.
So this is what's interesting, I think, about the start of Cyberpump. So I guess we'll just do it. Cyberpump was your website that you had
Yeah.
for, is it 28 years? Is it
Yeah.
what? So
It
from
was. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And I had the date here. It started on November 8th, 1995. And what I think is especially interesting about Cyberpunk, not just the longevity of it, but just how it kind of coincided with the start of fitness and the internet in general, and which
Hmm.
rules the world now. And you were right there at
Yep.
that time. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, so I found out about the internet really through work as an engineer, and we had so my day job is developing autopilot systems, and so back in 1995, one of the guys in our department, they had a company that was out of a bank started free websites, and it was called GeoCities,
Mhm.
and it was just talk around the coffee pot. He said, you can get your own website, and this was where all the discussion was in these news groups only. There was no browser with even pictures at the time, and I'm like, oh, what the heck, that'd be cool. Everybody would see something I would put up like a picture or whatever, and
Yeah,
so I joined GeoCities, and the only way to manage the website was through work. And we also had this special analytical package, a software package that was only on a special Unix workstation, and no one else at the company. So no one else at the company had access to internet back then. There was no rules, there was no company rules or anything. And the only
yeah,
reason we had that connection was the special workstation that we had was connected to the internet in those news groups and everything. And so I would update, I put a picture out there. It's like, oh, that's cool. And then I recognized that, okay, what do I put on here? And then back then, because again, the Netscape Navigator was the first browser that really
yeah.
even
So
had
how did people
pictures.
find it
And
back
and
then?
so
How did people find
yeah, so that's where I'm going.
Yeah,
So that's where I'm going with this is at the beginning of websites, everybody was just making link sites because no one could find anything, right? so people were like, oh, I found this, and they put, so all their websites were literally just list of links and categories. Okay, about that time Yahoo was going on as well, and Yahoo was starting up, which had their own, it became number one for providing how to get to, how do you find stuff. It was Yahoo, and they had massive amounts of links by categories.
Yeah, so I was 15 around that in 1995, and I that's when I started getting on the internet also, but not in a capacity of helping in any way. Just but it was all about there was AOL and CompuServe and
That's right.
Prodigy, and you get these discs for 10 free hours, and
Yep.
and it kind of helped because there was no searching. So it was a service that basically had chat rooms, but then also kind of, I guess it was kind of, I mean, that's kind of what it was doing. It was like a mini internet really, but it was kind of linking to places in the internet because there was no
No
way to
search
navigate
engine.
it. So that's kind of what I
Yeah.
never really thought about it, but that's kind of what they were. They were kind of services to help figure out what the hell's on the internet.
Yep. And so I'm like, I don't want to do just another link site.
Mhm.
And through various the news groups contacts, I started reaching out. Matt Brisky was a key element as well, because he was high intensity training, which aligned completely with Dr. Ken. And
Mhm.
I saw him battling people, arguing on the news groups. And I reached out to him. I don't even know how I ended up reaching out to him. And so he was one of the first writers for Cyberpump as well. And frankly, through his network of strength coaches, pretty soon people were coming out of the woodwork, and I had this at least a dozen writers. And where I was going with this is I want to provide content. So Cyberpump is probably the first strength training website that actually provided content,
Yeah,
routines, articles on lifting,
it's amazing. I
and
mean,
no
that's
one
history
else
right there.
had.
Yeah,
And then one
ironhistory.com.
other element and then one other element that I saw too was no one's updating. These link sites are going stale. And so the kind of the railway for Cyberpump was, we're going to provide content daily. No one else is doing it.
Mhm.
And so I took off from there with the free website, and it very quickly it became frankly number one. I can't think of, bodybuilding.com was started, but we were way ahead of them in providing content as well. I think it was bodybuilding.com, but it
How
was
did
way
you
ahead.
so what, just to visualize for people. So basically it was like a page with a couple links to articles basically and
Yep.
maybe a few pictures. Did where did I mean it's a pretty obvious where it came, but did you remember thinking of the name Cyberpump? Like when it coming up? Do you have a memory of
Yeah.
when that was?
Well, I sort of stole it.
Okay.
Frankly, no one knows the story, so this is the first
All right,
story.
let's hear it.
So so I believe it was in the more modern Iron Man when the internet first started. And I didn't really have a name for it yet. And it was one of the ladies that started doing this column on the internet. And she said something in one of the articles. It was like news blurbs of some of the content. And she said something like, get your pump in cyberspace.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, because cyberspace was a term, not
I was about to
today,
say,
but
I don't think kids even know that term anymore,
they
but it's
don't they don't know
yeah,
what that term is. So
yeah, but
back
that's
in
what
the
they used
day,
to say, right? So the internet
cyberspace,
basically was
yeah.
yeah,
So I'm like, cyber pump. And
yeah.
that's how basically, and Drew Bay actually he's still involved in high intensity training. It's kind of funny. He's an older dude like I am. So there's a lot of young guys too. PJ Street, I don't know if you know, PJ is an awesome personal trainer, nutritionist, by the way. PJ, if you're happen to watch this, I'm plugging you. He's just a guru on real diet for lifestyle, for the life.
Nice.
And so I got a bunch of Lyle McDonald, today now he's arguing with all the guys, the PhDs. So he was another guy, and
I
I
think
got
Laura
all of
might be in
these
Austin,
guys. Plus,
actually. I have in Austin. He either
yeah,
might be here or he used to be here. My guy,
he is. I
I
think
have a
he
guy who
is.
works my back that used to know him, actually. I think he's mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
and
yeah.
so so I then caught on to the marketing thing of the hit wars.
Yeah. I was gonna
Okay,
ask you about that.
I latched onto that recognizing to get the visibility. And Matt Brisky was at the front of that with Dr. Squat Fred Hatfield.
Can you
And
tell?
those
So
two
I
were
don't. So I, being on the internet for 20 years and reading and going on history, I've heard of it. I hear people say, "Oh, that was back in the day of the HIT Jedi," but I don't actually know what it is. So I was hoping that you can. I know, especially if you said you latched onto it, if you could enlighten me, because I know I think it was just people arguing on Usenet groups. That's kind of what I get.
yeah, but
Yeah.
it carried over into the websites, right? And Matt Brisky was at the front. Matt Brisky, and I don't know, he's probably still writing. He's just a prolific writer, and he has been for decades. And so I got him to. He wrote a column. Yep,
Yeah.
he wrote a column, and him and I started, conversing back and forth. I said, I'll publish your column in Reflections of a Hitter, and
Yes.
that's where he would publish his, very funny guy too. He would publish a lot of the battles going on in the hit wars, and it got to the point where Fred Hatfield actually put it in print magazine on Muscle and Fitness, or a rebuttal of in of course Matt latched on to the. I think Matt probably is the one that came up with the HIT Jedi
Okay.
in against the dark side.
Oh, volume.
Plyometrics, Olympic lifting, volume, you name it. So that's
Yeah.
the dark side. The HIT Jedi or high intensity training.
So it was just kind of what was it, tongue in cheek, or was it just mean spirited? Everyone just got really
It
behind
was
it.
tongue in cheek. It
Yeah.
was it was still tongue in
See,
cheek.
I don't know.
But
The way I hear
but
people talk about it sounds like it was like the beginning of almost trolling. Like people were just mean, but I
it
don't.
was.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
was. Oh, there's no question it was.
yeah.
Yeah, no question. And Matt's column blew up. So
Okay.
so Cyberpump blew up big time. That just helped blow it up again because people weren't providing the content. So people want to, just like anything today, drama. But it was drama. Cyberpump was involved with the first drama on training and arguing on training that was on the internet,
That is
and
also a
at the
milestone
focal
there.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, at the focal point of that,
So
to
when
the point where. Go ahead.
oh, I was just gonna say what. So with Cyberpump or really any websites even today, I know they used to have counters and things on them, but besides that, like I'm sure you had this. I don't know what a website. I mean, nowadays is 10,000. Way more people to probably 10,000 times what there were millions of people back then. But like, what kind of numbers were people visiting your website
Gosh,
today? Like, what's
I can't
blowing
even.
up?
It
I don't
was
even need ballpark even.
gosh, 50,000 a day.
A day. Wow. So
Yeah.
I discovered Cyberpunk when I first started working out. I probably did volume stuff for a very short time compared to a lot of people, maybe 6 months to a year. When I discovered Cyberpump and Hard Gainer. And to me, I was in college. I felt like I was, the way it's kind of homegrown, even like Hard Gainer and Dinosaur Files,
Uh-huh.
it felt like it was almost like a secret club, almost like kind of like an
Uh-huh.
old-fashioned club. You get your newsletter, or in this case, you get online. But it's funny, I had no idea that it was like the main website at the time, but I thought I found something. And I remember showing some other friends at college or guys that were working out. And so it was interesting to me to find out years later that how popular it was, which I didn't know. Yeah.
It gave it gave a platform, and then so what I ended up doing is I started recruiting writers, especially those that were aligned and were again making sense to me. And then I started creating columns for them all, basically as sub pages, and putting in sort, training section, a rant section. So that was the other thing. I created Cyberpump Rant. So when you hear rant, like people ranting in bodybuilding and everything now, it I created probably one of the first probably the first strength training rant websites to
It's funny you
rant,
say it, and
and
it
where I
kind
was.
of rings a bell when you say it. It kind of rings a bell.
Well, I was using, yeah, I was using the mainstream magazines and showing, using the articles as just debunking the
Yeah.
mainstream magazines and some of the training they had in Cyberpump Rant. And then they had people submit their own routines and did a section there. And then one of the things, again, along the lines was the steel spiel. And that wasn't my idea. I think it was somebody else's idea from a writer standpoint. And it was a canned set of interview questions for people that visited Cyberpump.
Yeah, I remember
And
this. Yeah. Yeah.
when it was all said and I tried to everything along the way, I tried to automate as much as possible because I was one person. So as an engineer, the thing that gave me an advantage most people don't, warping back a little bit, is I
Yeah,
did
yeah,
the
yeah.
programming. I did all the HTIT, the coding. I'm the one that hacked the scripts and everything else, and because I was able to. So that really gave me an advantage right out of the gate. There's no what you see, what you get editors. There are no people that you could hire to do websites.
It's no
So
software.
being a
It's not
meathead,
drag and
yeah,
drop. It's
yep,
writing
yep,
code. Yeah. And if you don't know how to do
yeah, I
it,
was at the yep, I was at the beginning of the first, what they call it, content management systems that now is the norm that people
Mhm.
don't recognize. You can just drag and drop blocks and you can do
Yeah.
carts, shopping carts and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was at the beginning of all that. And it was all free. So that was it was all free back then. People just, again, hey, I can code this. I'm a programmer and I'm going to put it out there for free.
Mhm.
So I took advantage of that too.
So, why do you think you were doing it? For fun? It was just fun?
No, it was ego driven.
It was ego driven.
I can tell you that it was ego driven. I
Uh-huh.
had to whenever I, reflecting back in life, whenever I had a certain goal, I swear it goes back to being bullied. Okay, where I wanted to do something no one else could do and improve it, and so I set these goals along the way. One of them was being a writer for a bodybuilding magazine. Once that started to be number one, I was driven as all heck to drive to be number one on the internet, and it was all ego driven, frankly.
Well, I don't know if that's better or worse than money driven, because most days that's nowadays kind of what it is, you know? So,
Yeah, well, the
it's
bad
not
part
really
about
ego,
that,
but also, what'd you say?
I was going to tell you the bad part about that,
Oh, okay,
and
good.
it's not really a bad part because you could say maybe there's integrity at the time too. But so being at the front end of this, so Dr. Ken, you don't need all these fancy supplements. So in the high intensity training, it was, even with Stuart, it was, you don't need all the gobbledygook and snake oil.
Yeah,
And so I never started a online supplement store.
yeah.
And in regret, I was right in the ground floor, man.
Yeah, so
When
the
you're talking
opposite you're
about
supposed to do. You're supposed to be like, I don't believe anything, and this is all garbage, except for this one product.
Yeah, I know. I wish I would
Yeah,
have done that because I really truly was in the ground floor
you
of
could have.
online supplements if I would have went into that, given especially since weren't any at the time, right? And
Yeah,
but I knew that, and I said, nope, you don't need them. I'm not going to do that.
I remember I was
So
in college, so it was a few years, probably 99, 2000. And so, there was still like Myoplex and the big companies, a few of the meal
yep,
replacement stuff. But there was a website, it might be around, I don't remember exactly what it was called, but there's versions of it now where it's like it's not just proteins, it wasn't Iron Mines. But it was like basically you order different levels of protein depending on cost, and it came in literally a clear bag, garbage bag
yes,
inside.
yes. I remember I bought from them, and it was
Yeah,
like bulk, right? In
yeah.
bulk,
And
and it
I
was
was
a
in
good
college. It was like
deal.
$4 a pound,
It
and
was a good
it was
deal
like
at that
chalk,
time.
and it made
Yep.
it just tore my insides up. But I would just keep eating it.
Yep. Same here. I
Yeah,
forgot all about that, Jared.
yeah.
But yeah, it was a great deal too. You could like massive bag of protein, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was like no, none of the marketing, but who knows what was in it.
Like 10 pounds. Wasn't it
Yeah,
like 5, 10
it
pounds
was a
of it?
big old. I would get like a big old
Yeah.
bag, and it would come like that in a
Oh,
box.
in a bucket. Did you ever get the bucket? Now I remember it was in a bucket, the bag, a
I
big,
didn't get the
like a
bucket.
big pail. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's funny. That could have been you. That could have been you.
Yeah. It could have been me, man.
Yeah. So in the late 90s also, Hardgator was already going. I think Hardgator started in 91, maybe 92, something like that. Or was it 89? No, started 89? I'm not sure, but it was
I
already
could,
going.
yeah.
How did you hook up? 'Cause I know you wrote for Hardgainer and Milo
So
and
yeah, so I hooked up with Hard Gainer through, again, my website expertise. They had no online presence, and I can't remember, they had a U.S. rep that I contacted John Lashinsky, and I worked with John for years, and then Stuart. Stuart had zero, even after when we started the website, Stuart had zero online presence whatsoever. And I proposed to John Lashinsky and then to Stuart to get his website going. And also at the time, discussion forums started, and there was zero discussion forums on common sense training. So I was hooked on Stuart from a subscriber standpoint as well. And so in the back of my mind, also, it was targeted to be a writer as
Yeah.
well. So I had a bunch of different angles to come at it. And so the Hard Gainer Roundtable was born. The Hard Gainer website, I think I even sent you one of the first I created. I was not a graphic artist, but I created was one of the first on for Hard Gainer Online, one of their first logos because I did their website. And again,
Yeah,
there was no programmer, so I could do that programming.
I'll show you that. I'll show that. I'll share that. But I also was looking when I was
Yep.
kind of researching you. I did. You ever used the Wayback Machine? Do you know what that is? It's nothing to do with the back.
Yes.
Yeah, if you go and
Yes.
you look at old
Yep.
websites. So I was searching up Hard Gainer and Cyberpump, and I found a few more images also. And actually, it's funny. I was looking just before our interview started. I was looking to see if I could find some. I have all the issues of Hard Gainer in these binders, and they're official by the
Oh,
full
yep.
series. And I was trying to figure out what articles you wrote. So I just Googled a few and it popped up. So I was just looking at some of them, and this one from issue I think 56. Um, there you are doing some belt squats there. But
Oh,
right,
yeah. Yep.
but right down here, I thought this was interesting. I'll share this, but it basically says announcing the birth of our website. For all you computer buffs, blah blah blah. We're entering cyberspace. You'll find us at hardgainer.com and some stuff. And I'm thinking that's probably has to do with you, some of that.
Yep.
Yeah. So I
Yep.
don't know. I thought that was
And
interesting.
a little known, yeah, and a little secret, only a few people know. So the Hard Gainer Roundtable also, because again, I was at the front end of doing the software, and it was free software to start with. And so I didn't really want people to know I was doing Cyberpump and Hard Gainer at the same time. So I created an alias.
Yeah.
And originally when I started the roundtable for Stuart, I was known as Webby Webmaster. And then I needed a real name, and so I took my retired farmers that lived next door to me in Iowa's last name Anthus and created Stephen Anthus. So
Okay.
I am Stephen Anthus for all the
That was
anybody that
you.
might that was yeah. So that was me, and Webby Webmaster was me back in
Wow.
the day as well. And so I had my alter ego, and only Stuart and John knew
Mhm.
that I was Stephen Anthus. So
Yeah.
I didn't want to create any sort of conflict or anything at the time.
Yeah. That's cool. Did you ever meet Stuart?
I never met Stuart.
Stuart,
I
no.
Nope, I never did meet. I never met John Lashinsky either.
Yeah. Magic of the internet. Magic.
Yep. Yep.
So so Cyberpunk is up and running. When did you get the idea to start kind of the Cyberpunk network, which was several, you have the grid board and Iron History a few
So
years later, yeah, Dr. Ken's
so
thing.
along the way, I got booted from GeoCities multiple. Finally, got completely booted. Originally, they awarded me a bunch of product like were because it was like #1 website on GeoCities. It was one of the top traffic drawers. So they had like incentives for traffic,
Hmm.
and they ended up booting me off because I had so much traffic.
So
And
first
so
they liked you, then it was too much. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
and so I did one of the original virtual private servers at the time, and that cost money, and pretty soon that got overloaded, and my
Wow.
wife says to me, "Why are you doing this again? Now it's costing money.
Yeah.
Okay, basically, quit letting your ego drive you."
Yeah.
And so, believe it or not, it was one day when one of the two kids was sick. I decided, okay, she's right, because Cyberpump at that point was $1 a month, $12 a year donation. And so the other thing Cyberpump was you didn't call it a member site, I called it a donators area.
Hmm.
So there was and I had a PO box. No one trusted the internet for putting their now people stick their credit card in all day.
Yeah.
And so I got a PO box, and people were I had prior to that point where again $1 per month. I said, okay, I'm going to pull it behind password protection.
Yeah.
If it dies, it dies. and it is what it is. And so it ended up surviving, and people donated.
Yeah,
Now,
I remember donating. I don't remember sending a check in. I find it hard to believe I would do that, but maybe I did. I don't. Was that only the way you can pay? Was it by a check?
only at the start,
Oh, okay.
but
Yeah.
quickly after that, I was also on the ground floor of eBay and PayPal.
Yeah.
So if you look at the start of PayPal, I forget when it was. In fact, Elon Musk, I think, was involved in first PayPal.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was on the ground floor of having a PayPal account as
Yeah.
well.
I think I was early-ish too, not getting money, but paying people basically through eBay. Like I remember my eBay account says I've been on there since 1998, and
Oh,
PayPal was around
yep,
that time
yep.
also. So yeah, I must have done that. I don't remember sending a check in, but who knows? It was 20 years ago. But I joined the donator sites. I remember.
So yeah, and then I had to go to dedicate. I went to a dedicated server,
Okay.
which is where we just got off of completely, with recently with IronHistory and then the grip board and everything,
Mhm.
and so that obviously was a cost, and so went to a dedicated server. I didn't know, it was new territory for me, and but I could basically, I was the only one on it, and so I could register all sorts of domain names now and
Mhm.
have and basically manage those on this dedicated server, because I wasn't co-hosting with some hosting company, so I
Mhm.
had complete control over that. And so I'm like, oh, Cyberpump network, I'll create all these different features, and I'll register train hard with Dr. Ken. I'll try. And Joe Rourke was about that time as well with IronHistory, and was able to register and host all those things on a dedicated server at the time. And it was through the donations I was able to do that.
Do you remember with IronHistory how you hooked up with Joe?
I knew you were going to ask that, and
I
I
have to
can't.
ask
I
that.
I can't. I can't remember. Hopefully, Joe, the historian, can remember. But
Yeah, right.
at first, we almost didn't get together, because Joe, I remember, I think I may have had his contact through Flex,
Mhm.
okay, at the time. And he had, I think, factoids, and I can't remember when he had started that. And I was gun shy because he was associated with everything that I was writing against, the bodybuilding muscle magazines, right? I was like, but
For those who don't know, Joe Rourke was the official IFBB historian. He wrote a column in Flex for many years. Every month he would have a little history blurb about something, or sometimes like a little column. So that's what he's referring to. Yeah.
yes, and so we almost didn't get together because I had this. I was worried about the reputation of this writer that supports pro bodybuilding and
Yeah.
everything, and we just got discussing it, and with proper context and everything, and he was obviously Joe's Joe, and we hit it off, and so I'm like, okay, I need to. That's not Joe. Joe is the historian. It's his era of bodybuilding, for example. Argue or not, was pre-steroid, right, or not. He just happened to be writing that column, and
Mhm.
so we hit it off, and he started a column on Cyberpump that you now have full access to, which 20 years worth, and
I
and
know.
he was a machine, and so I wanted to update daily, and he was right spot on updating weekly in his column. So
Well,
we hit it off.
you don't remember where you first contacted each other through? Did you
No,
talking
I
about it?
don't. I think
Okay.
it's through Flex, frankly, me probably sending him an email. I
Oh,
think
okay.
I sent him an email, inquiring, would you be interested in writing, a history column for Cyberpump.
Mm, nice.
And so yeah, especially since he was involved in Strongman and just Iron Game, right?
Yeah,
And
it seems
and
like a lot of people who are interested in strength training and that Dr. Ken high intensity, like there's always some history articles mixed in there. It seems like people always
yep,
talking about some of the older lifters, and Brooks Kubik obviously is that's a big part of what he wrote about. Actually, how I got interested in a big part of it also
yep.
through him. So it kind of probably it was sparsed here and there. Probably thought it would be a good idea. That'd be cool to have a column on that. So
Yeah,
yeah,
and I have met Joe multiple times. So
yes,
in
yes,
case
yeah,
you were going to, yeah.
yeah.
So I actually have, especially being in Illinois
Yeah,
and
actually, I
myself
have a
in Iowa.
picture. I'll share it right now, actually.
Okay,
Okay.
okay.
of you guys together. So that's how Iron History started. So Joe started on there,
Yep.
and then I think I don't know, it was right before, I know it was around the same time the grip board started.
Yep, it did. I
Yeah.
got interested. I had wrecked myself in powerlifting. It's the only body part I hadn't wrecked yet, my grip. And it was Brooks again through hard training. There is a newsletter, hard
Yeah.
training newsletter,
Yeah.
where it used to be HIT newsletter.
Yeah.
And
I got a
he wrote
bunch.
an article. He wrote an article about grip and the captains of Crush. And I'm like, oh, that seems really cool. And then being on the ground floor, that somewhat before it blew up, especially with the grip board. I kind of helped blow that up when the grip board started. So I found the grip board. It wasn't the grip board at the time. It was a free website again, a free discussion forum. And I got involved as a moderator. And it, like everything, again, when I set this goal, I went all in to learning about grip. And at that time, there were very few captains of Crush. I learned about the Ironman gripper from Brooks
Mhm.
and went all in, bought those grippers, and wanted to figure out how to become a captains of Crush and see if it was even possible.
Do you
And
remember what
so
you
that's,
started at? Like you first, do you remember you were able?
gosh, it was again right about the same time, because if you look at the grip board where it's at right now, I was the first member. It's over 20 years ago. So it's about probably about 22 years ago,
Okay. I
somewhere.
actually meant what you started at with your grip. Like
Oh,
did you have a
oh,
strong grip already?
I couldn't close a number one
Okay.
at
Yeah.
the when I first started.
And how long so you became a captain crush, you closed number three. What
Yep.
how long did that take you?
Gosh, it was like 2 years again in order to do that. It was a long
That's actually
time.
not bad. That's a
Yeah,
big
I mean,
change to make.
but when it grip exploded,
Yeah.
we thought people were trolling. Sexton was the first mash monster. He did it in a few months because he ended up, of course, he's one of the best of all time,
Yeah. I mean, I
frankly,
know
from a
his name.
crushing
Yeah.
from a crush standpoint. But so I needed to figure out. I figured out a way. I couldn't train the same way I did with weights, and I had to completely focus myself on grippers, for example, and trying to close that. So I did a ton of experimentation. Then I ended up. The other first was I published an ebook, basically a KTA on how
Right.
to close the captains
I
of
was going to ask you
Crush.
about that. Yeah. So how did what does KTA stand for? And so and that was just based on your program. Is it still around? I mean, you still see it out there.
Well, in reality, it's kick-ass training adapted. Really, is what it
Okay.
amounted to, and and so it became known as the Gripper program, and pretty soon through the grip board, I started the grip board. It was actually the grip page first, and people started purchasing the program. And at that time, captains of Crush, you didn't have a set distance to start. Now you have a credit card
Yeah.
and you have to
Yeah.
show a
Yeah.
credit card.
Yeah.
There was no starting set distance,
Yeah.
and so the captains of Crush blew up in after I certified, and I think I was like, I don't know, there's only 50 or so at the time, and the next following years, because of a lot of it due to people talking, again, discussion of how to train, and then even my gripper program, the certifications blew up. And rightfully so. It really should have, because you could do a deep set and you end up starting at an
Sure.
inch, at
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
inch.
Yeah. Yeah.
So rightfully so, Ironmind changed the rules,
Hmm.
and made it, because you could be all over the place and it wasn't consistent. And it really was cheap. In a way, it was like doing a partial. And so I definitely resonated. It was a really good rule change, I think, that they made going forward.
Hmm.
And the other thing that they also had changed was you could use your own gripper before, and now they send the gripper a brand
Oh,
new
really?
one. So
Oh,
yeah, so
okay.
they send a brand new one. Before, you could use your, and it's a $25 spring, with handles. You're gonna have variations in what the strength
Sure.
is, even at the captain's of Crush.
Yeah.
And so I mine for sure was not on the hard side. I can tell you that right
Gotcha.
now.
Gotcha. Who
Yeah.
did I think I have a picture also I'll share right now of you certifying someone that you were certified with, because that's how it at least used to be. I don't know how it is now. I think it still is. You have to go to someone who has
Nope, you
previously
can
done
do
it.
it. You can videotape
Well,
it,
now you can
especially
videotape.
now that you
That's
have
how it used to
they.
be. You have to
Yep,
go to
yep,
someone and they'd watch you do
yep,
it, and usually be in Milo
yep,
the next month. It's and you always look
yep.
be a range of maybe to be one or two, sometimes it'd be five or six. But then as the magazine got farther along, it seemed like there was more and more every month.
That's right. Yep.
Probably that's why they changed the
Yep.
rules a little
Yep.
with the credit card
Yep.
distance. Um, so how are you involved in the Monster
Well,
Mash?
so the Mash Monster
Mash
certification,
Monsters, yes.
I started on the grip board, and part of it was there was only one certification, that was Iron Mine at the
Hmm.
time, and everybody wanted to know. Everybody knew and talked that grippers varied, and it's obvious they do vary,
Hmm.
and so that got started because of the fact people want to know how they compare to other people. And so, well, why not have traveling certification grippers? So
Mm,
people know that they actually are certifying on the exact same gripper as Joe or Pete. And let's
gotcha.
have different levels. Let's make it a pyramid, and who's at the top of the pyramid. Okay.
Okay.
And the grip board was facilitated to have judges because, again, people are rabid about it. And so the certification caught on because it was different. And for the Mash Monster, it was parallel handles because Iron Mine at the time, I think, probably already had. I'm not sure if they had the credit card at the time. I think they probably did at the time we started. It's like, okay, we're going to do parallel handle,
What does
and we're
that mean?
also
I'm sorry. I know
so the
about grip.
handles, the inside, so the handles would be parallel. So the distance when they start the gripper, the distance between the handles is the set distance,
Hmm.
and you cannot be past parallel as measured within the insides of the handles. So if you look at handles when they're closed, if
Yeah.
they're parallel, that's the starting distance basically,
Okay.
or greater. You can always
Gotcha.
be
Okay.
greater.
But the handle's still on a V. It just you can't start past
You
parallel.
can't start past
Past parallel.
parallel. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
And so those grippers started going. We put a process in place, put the rules in place. Again, it was bottom up. People had input into the rules. Yeah, it started from Iron Mind's rules, and basically those grippers. We started with level one. Heath Sexton was the first one,
Was he?
and yep. And as people got stronger, Warren Teeting, the master of grippers,
Yes.
building grippers, he in Minnesota, he was the guy that built all the Mash Monster grippers.
Really? So
And
warranting is people might not know. I don't even know when he started. I know they had him as late
I
as
don't,
the 80s, but it might have been like early as like the
uh-huh,
60s.
I
And
think
I
so.
think that's where you can go into Iron Man magazine. And I think there
Yep,
were little ads for just like super strong gripper and different. That's all they call it. They didn't have one, two, three. I think they just had like hard, super hard, or something like
yep,
that. I don't think they was popular. I think Terry Todd would take them or was into the closing them, and he would show people to pass them around to see who can close them. And then I guess it was the late 80s. I think those were still around, but that's when I think the Iron Mine ones started coming out, maybe
yep,
late 80s, early 90s. Um, but it was Warren Tating who was just making those. I guess it was like one
yep,
guy. So he
yep.
kind of was he still making them, or did he like come out of retirement to make them for you?
He was still making them because there
Yeah.
was Weightlifters Warehouse was making. They had grippers called Beef Builders, and
Okay.
and that's kind of how I found out Warren, and then just again people discussing that Warren made those grippers. And so I approached him, and we had a lot of discussion again about wire sizes, and mainly wire sizes and width. So we had input from the crowdsourced.
Yeah.
Again, how wide do these need to be? And so we gave Warren the spec for each level as people, obviously the springs got thicker and thicker, and Heath was mainly the guy that was a tester. Okay, is this a big enough jump? So at the very beginning, we had to make sure at least there was some sort of jump in between the grippers from level one to level two. And Heath Sexton became the tester as well along the way as he certified going up the chain. I think he ended up getting to maybe level 5 or 6. And so he was really
How many pounds was that? Do you know?
I have no idea.
If you don't know, you're the guy supposed to know.
No, well, that was part of the mystique.
Oh, really?
So we never, along the way now you can get rated like Matt Cannon, of course, Cannon Powerworks, who took over. He will rate grippers for you,
Oh, okay.
and you can get that as a service, and it's a thing now for sure to have grippers rated. So that was even when the rating started and people were doing their own apparatus. We decided to keep it on the down low, and just kind of the mystique of the Mash Monster certification, and people got so good calibrated hand wise. You'll find data out there that basically shows approximately how many pounds using a calibrator.
Was it
They
also
are.
partially because they weren't, because I think if I remember off of Iron Mine was like one is 140, they would say, and then two was maybe
Yeah, those
280, and
right.
three was maybe 360 or 340 or something like that. But so those, you would say those really aren't accurate, possibly because it's in the range.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
yeah. So
Because these were done with, makeshift pulling on the handles with
yeah.
measurements and everything else. And I think they were just estimates based on somebody that had probably closed one of them before, and Iron Mine had used those. I don't think they had actually done any testing at that time. But so that's how the Mash Monster got started, and in a miracle of all miracles that I don't know how many countries that they went to, but over the course of 20 years, I also had Warren create backups for those grippers because I just figured they'd get lost. One would get
How
lost.
many
So
were there? Is it literally one gripper that goes around the world, or
yes,
per level? Yeah.
it's 10. We got up to level 10, so there's 10 levels that traveled all around the world. And level 1 obviously is the easiest, so it's traveled the most.
Do they weaken over time?
Yeah, there is some degree.
Yeah, yeah.
How much that was,
Wow. Yeah, yeah.
we don't not it's not huge, but there is some seasoning again that's going to weaken slightly over time. Obviously, as you go up, that's not a problem because, like at level 8, I think there's only a handful of people who ever closed level 8, where the handles were actually touched.
So where are those grippers now?
So those grippers are up for sealed bid
Oh, okay, I
over,
saw that. I didn't know what that
yeah.
was, but
So
okay.
sealed bid, Matt at the helm, and they have been open for sealed bid for the last week.
It's
And
funny. I was doing a little research and I saw that, and I thought it was an old article. And I looked, and it was
nope.
just a couple weeks ago or something like that.
Yep.
So
In
we're
rate,
going to put this out soon. You can make an announcement, I guess, or give a little more details about what that
yeah,
is.
it's actually
It's interesting.
finishing at noon. They won't. It'll
Oh,
be
today
too late
it's
for
not
them, which
coming
is
out by
fine.
noon.
Yep.
It's 2 hours.
Yep. I know for sure. That's why people laugh, but
Yeah.
it'll be all said and done. And so yeah, did I, when we first started this, did I ever think they would be collector's items? Heck no. It's never thought, never even crossed my mind.
Yeah.
Not even as far as a year ago.
Yeah.
Not even a year ago before, it's like thought never crossed my mind they would end up being collector's items.
So
And
are
part of
people
it
not
is
doing
for
it anymore? Is it people
no,
not?
we're decided just because Matt Cannon is going to have a new improved version of it. So Matt is got the name Mash Monster. He's got the grip board now, and he's going to do a much more inclusive, including women, I think, in the plan as well, and get rid of some of the nuances and sticky stuff that was associated with, like, for example, only sending it from the U.S. and things like, and have maybe foreign stations for the grippers, and let people train on replicas and things like that. So all the things that were wrong with the Mash Monster, I think Matt's gonna fix and relaunch it in 2024.
All right, cool. That's an announcement here. Now,
Yep.
one more thing on and I don't know if it's a touchy subject because I don't really know. It's just me looking at forums. Was there like a competition between at some point, like between, or a rivalry, I should more say, between an Iron Mind and the Mash Monsters as far as
Well,
that
there wasn't as far as I was concerned
goes?
at the time. Randy Strawson is I call a friend of mine, and I think it was everybody else talking and trying to create something that wasn't there, and so I actually, Iron Mine was one of the main sponsors of the grip board for years
Okay.
after. Yeah, Randy and I was like, what's this, these guys are spouting off, and so Randy and I started communicating back and forth, and basically anything that someone tried to start buried the hatchet between us, and I've been friends ever since with Randy, including even now that the grip board, he's I'm not no longer doing the grip board, and so we would talk almost weekly, probably every 3 weeks or so, even on email back and forth,
Nice.
especially if anybody was doing anything big on whether it's Iron Mine. I'm still get excited about, when we're talking about Kyle Myerscough closing the number 4 was huge. And so, yeah, it was, again, any
Is
people
that
like
new? I remember the forest closed years ago, and there was the
yeah,
whole
this is
naked
new, but
hole.
by the new rules with the
Oh,
credit card.
okay.
Unbelievable. It's like, I was telling Dr. Strassen, I was just like, man, this is like a huge of all time human feat. So definitely go look at that, Jarrett,
So
because
no one since they did the credit card, no one's done the four until now.
until Kyle.
Oh,
Yep.
I didn't know
No
that.
one ever did
Yeah,
the 4 under the new rules.
gotcha.
And I mean, the 4 is literally a brick. In
Yeah,
the hand strength that that guy has
yeah.
is literally like of all humankind of all time, for
Wow.
sure, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right, I'll have to look that up. I didn't know that. That's cool. So, what you mentioned, which is one now we're kind of back before we kind of wrap things up with Dr. Ken. Did you mention earlier that you kind of got to know him? What in what sense? I met Dr. Ken in person once. So I lived in New York City for a long time, and
Oh, wow.
I was always looking for hardcore gyms, and there really weren't any, as odd as that sounds, or in the '90s and early
Oh, I
2000s.
know. I can believe it.
Yeah, but so I would go out to Long Island or Queens for a while, and I trained at oh man, what's it called? Damn it, Iron.
Iron Island.
No, it wasn't Iron Island. It was one of Dr. Ken's kind of disciplines that he started a gym
Oh,
there, and
okay.
I trained with them. Uh, Gridiron is what they called it. It's
Okay.
Gridiron, and he had two gyms. One was at kind of a school out on Long Island, kind of like in their off their football field, like a little garage. And I trained there once, and he showed up, and it was me training with one guy and maybe half a dozen other people there training. And I remember when he came in, and he was like, they knew that I was a big nerd about this stuff, so they introduced me, and like, I'd been reading his stuff for a decade at the time. And he was very nice. And then, but when he was working out, even though he was working out someone else, he was those the energy in the gym. I'd never seen this ever, where as soon as he left afterwards, the energy of the gym just dropped. It was like everyone was working harder just because he was there. And then
I
I
can
remember he
believe it.
thanked me for help setting the pace of the person he was training's workout. So I thought that was cool.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
I never met him
yeah,
unfortunately, I never got
yeah.
to meet him in person.
Mhm.
So I just we corresponded. I was very fortunate to be one of people on his email list distribution
Mhm.
at the time, and I asked for permission for to publish his articles, and in some of his articles he was doing a little preamble reflection that was completely unique. So he would do that on and send it to me, and I would add it to the top of the article in his reflection in current day at the time. And so yeah, I was super fortunate to get to know him and be able
That
to
way.
converse back and forth. I felt really honored to be able to do that because again, he was definitely the start. And again, back to our start of our conversation, he was the
Yeah.
start of everything, frankly.
Yeah, I mean, he was almost the sole voice of that type of training during the '80s. I mean, and he
Yep.
had his newsletter at the end of the '80s and a few articles here. And Stewart was starting at the early '80s, I think. Also, I don't know how I don't know. He's definitely came less and less volume over the years, so I'm not sure where he was when he started. But grip training and heavy object lifting, he was probably really the only one talking about that at all. Maybe Kim Wood would chime in, and they knew each other, I think. And but until Hard Gainer came, and then Dino Files, and then Cyberpump, and it kind of started reviving that type of training. I would say that's my opinion from what I've seen.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I agree.
I kind of just hit the tail end of it, but
So one of the things I don't know if it's common knowledge or not, but I'm pretty sure at least I heard this a couple of different sources. I think even maybe from John Lasinski, I can't remember, but Stewart got his start with Hard Gainer, and Dr. Ken wrote for Hard Gainer right out of the gate. And the rumor, I've never been able to confirm this, not from Stewart himself. I don't think I ever asked him, but the HIT newsletters distribution, that's what Stewart started with. That's how Stewart got Hard Gainer going, was through Dr. Ken and being able to distribute it through the same subscribers as
he
the
got
HIT
his mailing
newsletter.
list. You mean kind of?
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. I would like to interview Stewart one day. That'd be good. But Stewart, he actually was kind of the first one that helped me see more sensible training, non-volume training. Actually, I think I have it on my training diaries. Like the first, it was all this gobbledygook, and then it's just like hard gainer trainer or something, and it was starting 20 rep squats or something like that.
Uh-huh.
I was in college, and anyway. But yeah, that's cool that you were involved with all of that. So one last thing, I know you kind of got just so all these websites have continued, and like you've recently retired, and I just wanted to I thank you before, but I just want to thank you again in person for helping keep not only keep Iron History, giving birth to it and keeping it alive, but then also helping transition it to me, because it was technically we had some issues for a couple of months. We were on the phone
Yeah.
every few days trying
Yeah.
to things going on. So, and I'm sure you're still helping with issues. So I just want to thank you for that,
Well,
because
you're very welcome. Again,
yeah,
it's if you haven't gone to Iron History and you're watching this somehow and never been there, definitely go there.
yeah.
And I really appreciate, I know Joe does, that we have you and Matt to take over, because it would have been death otherwise. I wouldn't have given it would. I would rather it. I think I may have even shared this with you. If someone had said, "I'll give you 100,000 for Iron History," I wouldn't have taken it, frankly. There's just no way. Same thing with the grip board.
I mean, I think it's like I've been on it 15 years, so I've told Joe and you it's kind of just a playground for me for the past 15 years, and I see the value as liking the history of the Iron game. I feel like it's just a resource of just 20 years of some of the best historians, just fans and collectors and stories. And basically, this is a video version of that, but people have been writing about this type of thing and scans and just it's nothing that one person could have put together. Like, it's nothing that if you even if you had the best collection in the world and put it together, it would not have worked. This is a collective mind of the Iron game of various people's past that has just been pouring into this for 20 years. So if you use the search engine and you're interested in something in the history, it is a real. If you were a betting man, you should bet that we're going to have been discussed at some point in the
Yeah.
past, and some
And
things
it's
a lot,
awesome.
maybe something a little, but even the smallest names, I'll be like, I never heard of this guy. I'll type it in, and there'll be 5 posts about how that it's been discussed before. So if you're interested, it's a fun thing to dig around in. And even now, with 15 years, I still see posts every day that are threads every day that I never even seen before.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome. In so helping, I was very motivated to keep it going.
Well, I'm
And
glad
same thing with the
we're.
grip board.
And so, what is your training like today?
Oh, so training today is using mainly all machines, pretty much exclusively machines and cables as well. And it's very much, which is why if you go back, if you search Iron History, you'll come up, if you put mind muscle connection in Iron History, it's something that I stumbled onto. It's a real thing, 100%. And I call it in I don't remember where I read it, but it's the difference between intrinsic thinking and extrinsic mindfulness when you're lifting. And it's a new level of intensity and concentration. And
as much as I love Hard Gainer and the Hard Gainer magazine, I feel, and now there's a new Hard Gainer 2.0, I do feel the new magazine does a better job in Hard Gainer. Originally, 95% of it was all about pushing the numbers up. And if you get your
yep,
numbers up in the main lifts, you're going to get bigger and stronger. And and I feel, it was so anti bodybuilding and feeling where I feel like really a mold of those things is probably better for most people. And I feel Hard Gainer 2.0 does a better job of
yep,
people like a lot of people my age, maybe, or older, who've lived it and have kind of seen, and like it sounds like you have, I don't want to put words in your mouth. It sounds like you've changed your mind a little bit, or maybe
yep,
evolved, I should say,
yep.
your thinking on that. Or I don't know, is that fair to say?
Yeah, so very
Okay.
slow, very not super slow. I never thought super slow was, I always thought that was too slow.
Mhm.
It basically doing repetitions and going back to my engineering, and the best way to use the analogy is keeping acceleration as low as possible. So on the turnarounds at the start,
Mhm.
keeping the acceleration so you vary in using a very constant smooth rate. And back to calculus, the derivative of rate is acceleration. So a derivative of zero is zero. So if you have or a derivative of constant is zero. So if you have a constant, for those math freaks out there, so if you're at a very smooth constant rate, your acceleration is going to be zero. So that's how my focus is on very smooth, controlled, intrinsic, which means I don't count repetitions.
Mhm.
I try and keep the same amount of weight. I also do a lot of up and down stacks as well. So, and I'm doing what would be called I can't even remember, myo sets. So I do one set of 20, but the other element is I probably rest 10 to 15 seconds in between sets.
Mhm.
And so it ends up being a lot of rest, a couple repetitions of rest pause, all strung together, 10 seconds apart. So I'm done with my 20, basically somewhere between 15 to 25 repetitions with one exercise. And I use the exercise that doesn't create any pain. And the other part of intrinsic training is the hands, and grip are what, in my opinion, what wreck your elbows and your joints. The same thing with the knees if you're flexing your hips too much. So my hands are completely relaxed, and I call points of contact on the weight. Okay.
Mhm.
So same thing with hook. I actually have straps for back so that my hand is completely relaxed. Okay. Not doing this.
It's
Okay.
interesting you say that. I've actually been dealing with hand pain for the past, I don't know, 3 months now. Before that, it was elbow pain for 2 years. And for 2 years, when I had the elbow pain, yeah, I don't know. It's all combined. I've had hand pain, then it was elbow pain, now it's back to hand. And I swear it wasn't bench pressing because it didn't hurt it while I was bench pressing. And I was trying all these things, and even got a cortisol shot, and not until I stopped bench pressing did it go away. Now I'm not pressing a lot right now. I'm kind of trying some new
My
stuff,
hands are, yep.
but my
When I do
hands,
pecs, I don't bench press either,
yeah.
Jarrett. As soon as I in right now, it's all using the motion coming across, okay, for me, including I because of an injury also, I'm pressing and I relax my hand and create a point of contact, but I'm relaxing my forearm. And so I don't get triceps. I take triceps out of my pressing movement or my chest movement as much as possible.
Hmm.
And if I put it back in again of any significant weight, my elbows I'd feel
Yeah,
it immediately during the reps.
I can still press and it doesn't seem to upset my elbows, but I can't do direct elbow work with direct
Okay.
tricep work. If I add, my tricep is one of the few muscles that actually grows easily on me. I don't have many. It's one of the, but direct, I cannot do direct tricep work, and that's kind of where when I did it I was trying some higher volume stuff a couple of years ago, and it's been a little irritated ever since there. But yeah, this is what happens. You get old, you gotta change your
Yep.
change your.
Well, in part of the reason why I have a great ingrown system at 60 of
Mhm.
all the mistakes I made to give
Yeah,
me immediate feedback.
you got to find your own body. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got immediate feedback if something hurts,
Yeah.
right? If I'm doing something adverse. And so I just do exercises that I enjoy doing that don't, so I'm pain free. That's the other thing as part of longevity is not being sore elbows, joints, or anything else. So that's a part of why I'm so smooth in my lifting and so directive. Not super slow, probably 5.5, but
Hmm.
again, not exploding. And here's the trick of intrinsic and mind muscle connection. When you get to the point of failure when you're training like this, you can actually explode. It won't go anywhere, but you're actually exhausting all the fibers for sure.
So, that's another reason I like IronHistory.com. It's not just the history, but also, to be honest, for years, for like a decade, I was always the youngest person on IronHistory.com. I was like 20, late 20s, and everyone else was, 40, 50, 60. And now there are younger people now on it, but still we have a lot of older lifters. And I get good advice. Like I can see all the mistakes you guys made, and I don't have to. And we get
Yep.
a lot of good advice. But it's also inspiring to see, we have you and other people that are in their 70s and 80s that are still lifting and finding a way to enjoy their workouts and still be healthy. And that's, as you get older, especially, that's the big part of the goal. To see other people that are still doing that and talk about it and enjoy it is inspiring. So I enjoy that part about ironhistory.com as well. Uh, well, Bill, I really think we're gonna end it here.
Yeah,
Okay.
we went long. Boy, we go long.
Yeah,
I'm
this is
like,
good. No, this is
okay,
good.
so
I think we covered everything I wanted to cover. Unless there's anything you want to add,
nope.
I just want to thank you for sharing your history.
Donate to, I do have to say, for those that are watching this on Ein History, become a donator and support the cause. Okay, that's the one thing I want to mention, Jarrett. Okay, because it's super important. It's not a, it's cost money now to we move to the cloud, and Jarrett needs your support. Iron History needs your support, and the legacy needs your support going forward. So it's $20 a year. Donate and support this cause. Okay, we want it to survive for 100 years.
Exactly, and it definitely costs money. And we did have a bunch of supporters when we transferred to cloud. A lot of the payments that people may think they're automatic payments are no longer there. We've sent messages out. I'm going to send something on the board soon. Like you can donate by clicking on store at the top of any of the pages, and it's working now. It wasn't working for a couple
Yep.
months, but I'll also put something out to make it more clear in the not too distant future. It's on the list, but yes, I would appreciate any just donations. It's really minimum, but it just costs money, and none of us getting paid for this. It's just a
Yep.
labor of love, but it's
Exactly. I
it's
wanted to point
yeah.
that out though
Yeah,
for sure because
thank you. I appreciate it, Bill. And again, thank you for taking the time to this interview. I'm sure we'll talk again.
oh for sure.
And thank you for doing this. And I'll see you online. All
All
right.
right.
Take
Thanks,
care.
Jarrett.
All right.
Thanks a lot,
Take care.
man. All
Bye.
right. Take care. Bye.